Well, what's up guys, Ben here bringing you another video today. It is time. We're going to cover the remaining 10 teams for our season preview videos. I'm splitting 5 into this video, 5 into the next video. The 5 we're going to cover today are teams that have made either 1 or 2 changes, but mostly have the same package together from last season. So that is Atlanta FaZe, Miami Heretics, OpTic Texas, Toronto Ultra, and Vancouver Surge. We're going to cover Thieves, Carolina, Minnesota, etc. in the next video. We're going to focus on those 5 teams. I'd say it's a good mix of teams that are expected to win championships, expected to contend amongst the elite top 3 for said championships and make it to Sundays. And at least one of these teams I think is probably not going to make it a champ. So let's dive in and we're going to start with Atlanta FaZe. So FaZe, as you may remember, dropped Slasher for Draza last offseason, and the net result was 2 event wins this year. But I would say that it's a mixed bag because they didn't play great at champs. They got top 6, and they choked a number of finals, specifically I think Major 4. Major 1 against Toronto. I think Toronto was just the best team at that event. That split like once they got back from break. But I think Major 4 was the real opportunity for this Atlanta FaZe team to like win a 3rd event last year. So you look at this, and I actually think without EWC, we likely would have had Atlanta FaZe in the other video because I think they would have made a roster change after getting 6th at champs. But a big regain from the guys on that squad. They had a pretty dominant victory at EWC where they only dropped a couple of maps. So as you see here, had a couple of seconds, couple of thirds, or at least 1/3, a 6th at champs, and 2 event victories. And it's always the same thing every year when we talk about FaZe, because you look at the stats, and we can go to individual stats here in a second, but team stats, like these guys were dominant in pretty much every game mode. I think in particular the game mode for me that I think was their most successful was Control last season. They were like hands away sort of the best control team at the game, and they really did not have a weak map in that game mode. Their S&D was also very good at a 64% clip, which if you look at overall S&D stats would put them first as well. And there's a lot of stats you can like here. They're first in first blood percentage. They were first in first blood win percentage. Like these guys were definitely disciplined at, executing across the course of the whole season online and LAN. But it's the same thing as always with FaZe. It's about winning finals. And last year they won 2 and they lost 2. So 50%. A little bit of an improvement, but better than, not as good as you really want to see from this squad. So I think if you're Atlanta FaZe, you fixed the control issues last year that you had with Slasher, so you want to keep that going. It's going to be really hard to win at a 77, 78, 80% clip again, but if you can keep it in the 70s, being able to have that swing mode down is going to be really key. But floating around the 60s and hardpoint S&D should get FaZe to the bare minimum, which is to Sundays, and then they just got to pull up to the events and close. So I don't want to spend too much time really talking about this team because that's really just their biggest issue at the moment. You look at sort of how this game plays, their play styles, like it's fit perfectly for them. They play fast. They're a disciplined Surge team. They're going to trade effectively together. They use their nades well. They have awesome ARs to be able to hold down power positions. They got sub players that can really finesse. Like this game, like all the other top teams, is kind of built for them. And they just got to go out, execute, and win events on Sundays and close out because they're going to be pretty consistent all year. They don't really get upset too much online, at least last year. Taking a look at their schedule, they got a pretty interesting opening weekend. Toronto and Thieves is a pretty difficult opening stretch, but then they got Carolina and Vegas the next weekend. So I think a minimum FaZe probably going to be 3-1, I would assume, after these first 4 matches. They should have or should secure a bye going into the minor Major 1 tournament. I don't know how we're referring to it, but basically the online tournament. It's going to happen after the break. When they get back, they have Minnesota, Boston, and Cloud9, so not that hard of a stretch for FaZe. And if you scroll through, I think their schedule this year is actually like fairly favorable. Vancouver, OpTic, Miami, Minnesota, Boston, LAG, Cloud9, Major 2, also pretty favorable. Toronto, Carolina, Miami, Vegas, OpTic, Major 3, again, very favorable, should get a top seed again. And Vancouver, Thieves, Cloud9, LAG, Vegas, also good. So I think, look, like if you're someone and there are places where you can bet on a team getting first overall seed online, I think FaZe is probably going to be the team looking at schedules who is the most likely for me, considering they've done it every other year of the CDL. I think this is just going to be like every other FaZe year. I think they're going to be dominant online. They're going to put themselves in good positions. They're going to win a couple of events. But I think for these guys, yeah, they would love to go back-to-back EWC, the prize money, all that. But I think the key goal for them is to make it to a champs final and win. They haven't made it the last 2 years. And last year was their worst champ showing. And I think if they run it back again, if they have the same year as last year, and be honest, I think it might result in a roster change going to the next game. All right, let's switch gears and talk about a team that it did make a roster change. The Miami Heretics, as you see, these are their LAN results last year. It doesn't include EWC, and I can show you what they placed there. But as you see, they got last the first two tournaments, couldn't win online, had a pretty good showing at Major 3, and then top 8 at Major 4. Barely got them to qualify in the last spot for champs. Then they won a series in losers bracket, and that was it. They were mostly irrelevant all year when it came to events, online, LAN, whatever. And you see here, they were playing under the normal Heretics brand. They lost to Boston, the new Boston roster that was playing at the event for the first time, and they got 3-0'd by Heretic, or 3-0 by a Stallion. So I just think the net result of last year is this Miami team has got to be a factor. Decent showing, okay, iffy online, but they are just were awful on LAN pretty much all year. I mean, this doesn't include EWC stats. You can chalk in 2 more losses there, but they were 3-10 on LAN and 14-14 online. Like, I don't know what else to say about that other than you know, that online performance could be a little bit improved. You see the stats are pretty much just like even across the board, across all game modes. You got some strong maps, some weak maps, whatever. But bro, 4-4, like I'm gonna scroll through and show you here. 4-14 in hardpoint on LAN, 2-9 in control on LAN. Didn't win an invasion or a Karachi control last year on LAN. That is pathetic. So the net result is that they needed a roster change and they decided to bring in Rencord. That means someone's got to step aside. And in this case, it was Vickle. And actually Vickle's taking it a little bit farther. And he's actually retiring from competitive Call of Duty, or at least as a Call of Duty professional at the moment, and going back to studying at university, which I respect. I mean, listen, 21, get your degree. You're only going to play COD for a while. He's on that tricky Miami team anyway with tenuous roster situation. Long term, you know, I love Javi, but it was probably going to be difficult for him to hold down a consistent spot after this year. But tough to see a retirement, but he's a smart kid. I think he'll do well. And, you know, we're going to try and get him on some content if he wants to come on the flank and stuff like that. But Rencord coming in is pretty interesting for the squad. He was teaming with Super most of last year. And while they didn't attend every LAN that year, they did attend Miami and got 3rd. And they did attend champs finals and got top 6. But he was pretty good online. Like if I scroll up and show you Elite Stage 3 playoffs, got top 8. But they were pretty good online in the group stage of 4, got top 6 at stage 2. And got 4th at stage 1. So not too bad. It's Step 5 media team with Yako and Sukri along with Super. It's like really inconsistent online. But Rencord was playing well, and it kind of makes sense to me why he got picked up. I think to me, if you're a Miami fan, I think they need to improve on this hardpoint number. I think 28 and 41 on the season search was not what you wanted. They were still a good S&D team, and that's what we expected with them coming in. But these respawn numbers, both with control as well, were not ideal. If this team really wanted to do anything of note throughout the season, you see like, you know, that's the first stage, they were pretty even, but you see they really tapered off of stage 2. They made a roster change, got back to a little bit of online, at least a little bit more stability. But you see here, they really struggling to control stage 3. They struggled at hardpoint stage 4, and then at champs, they didn't win a single hardpoint at the event in the 3 matches they played. So I don't know if Miami is going to play a style that is going to lead to consistent results, but if they want to like try and get top 4 at one of these events or higher, they're going to need to find some consistency, some bread and butter maps. Because if you look at the overall total here, yeah, they were 5-3 at the end of the season at Invasion Hardpoint, which got removed from the pool. 7-5 at Karachi S&D, 6-3 at High Rise. They had some bread and butters. You see the lows are pretty low here on some of these maps, especially in control. All right, let's take a look at their schedule and then wrap up our thoughts on Miami. So they have Vegas and Vancouver first weekend, very winnable matches right there. And then Boston and Toronto. So Miami needs to take advantage of a week compared to some other teams, first 4 matches, and try and win at least 2 or 3 of these. And they got Cloud9, Thieves, and Carolina. So Miami has I would say a very easy stage 1 split. If they cannot find a way to qualify for winners bracket with this schedule, I don't know, because it gets way harder after this. Minnesota, LAG, FaZe, OpTic, Vancouver, Carolina, Boston. You play 2 of the top 3 teams, but it's still winnable. Vegas, FaZe, OpTic, Toronto, Minnesota is very hard of a stage 3 set. And the major 4, Thieves, LAG, Vegas, Cloud9, Carolina. So I just think for Miami, they got to take advantage early. And I'm going to make a prediction. Unfortunately, I see Miami being a bottom 4th team. And I think this is the last year of the full Spanish project. I just don't see how they're going to play consistently. I think a lot of their teams have gotten better. I think Rencord is good, but I think the inconsistency of players I haven't talked about yet, like from last season, like Lucky, it just is what it is with the squad. And while I think they maybe will take a little bit of advantage this week front end of schedule. I just think when they go to LAN, I just expect them to get top 8 or dead last. And I think they're going to run it back same way again this year. Speaking of a team that actually won something, let's talk about OpTic Texas, your CDL champs from last season. And what a ride it was for OpTic Texas last year. A lot of expectations with the new squad after they made a number of changes, bringing in Kenny, bringing in Pred. And the start to the season was okay. They were in the factor at some of these events, but fell short against the teams that were playing well, like Atlanta, FaZe, Toronto, etc. But they were taking care of business against New York. We'll get back to that in a minute. And they paid it off with a great victory at Major 3. Then they followed up with their worst split of probably all time. They couldn't win a Surge, couldn't win a series, got dead last. I wasn't sure what they were going to be like going into that home champs, and they played dominant at that event and won. And then at EWC, I thought they played pretty good. Just kind of ran into that tough head-to-head matchup. Amongst the top 3 last year is really a cyclical situation of matchups. And they really struggled against FaZe last year after really having their number the previous seasons, and only got 4th at EWC. But I think overall, look, if you're an OpTic Texas fan, like, I don't think you can be super mad about last year. Like 2 event wins, another finals appearance, pretty much consistently top 4 all year other than that one split. Like, I think that's great. And I think more importantly, and it's kind of applies, I think, to both FaZe and OpTic, like, you followed up your worst performance of the season with probably your best performance of the season. And I think understanding about how you got there, if you apply the right lessons, are going to be really key for this season. As we've talked about time and time again in these preview videos, no one has ever won champs back to back, and OpTic is going to try and deal with the complacency that sets in. Just trying to follow up that top season with trying to motivate yourselves, and a lot of competition has gotten better. I think if you look at the overall stats for OpTic, they are pretty good. You see the sub 500 record in Search, but that is really colored a lot by a slow start to the season, a lot of game 5s they lost, and also that bad stretch at Major 4 when they lost like 10, 11 searches in a row. But in that, like Hardpoint, they were probably the best Hardpoint team in the game by the end of the year, and their control was good, although that lack of improvement in control, I think, really hurt them in a couple of these matchups. It hurt them against Toronto. It hurt them in a couple losses against New York. And if you scroll down here against FaZe, they were 1-6. So I think if you're OpTic, to me, right now we only have 2 control maps, so the meta there is a little bit weird. But trying to be good in both maps, if OpTic can get this number to 60s, 70s, I think they're going to swing and kind of dominate the heads against FaZe, against Thieves. All right, let's chat a little bit about the individual performances on OpTic Texas. Overall, a pretty solid season for everybody involved. Not really a surprise that Ken is the one sort of floating about a 1 kitty. He's really sort of the gap-filled, dirty work player. And, it is what it is when you're in that position. But everybody else I thought was like, kind of about what you expect. AG leading the lane on Slaying, really no surprise there. I think for me, if you're an OpTic fan, this is a game mode I'm the most curious about this year. I know I talked a little bit about control, but I still feel like with this OpTic team in S&D, it was very streaky at times last year. And when they were good, they were great. When they were bad, they were really bad. And I think it really comes down to AG and Ken as Search players, because I think Ant and Brandon in the role today play are very effective at. But AG, started to get much better at generating first bloods last year, which you love to see. 82 is pretty good. Ken beating him in 92 is kind of crazy. The thing that I will always say with this OpTic team that I want to see them do is continue to share the rock on playing the bomb. Don't make Ant always be the one planting the bomb. They really shuffled that up by the end of the year. Continue with that strat, and I think they'll continue to still be a good Search team. And yeah, control stats, obviously very, very good for all involved. All right, let's take a look at the schedule, and then I'll give you my wrap-up thoughts on OpTic. They open against Boston and Cloud9. Should be 2 victories. We'll see. Cloud9 might prepare maybe something interesting in that series. And then you got Vancouver and LAG. So I really think OpTic might be 4-0 to start the season looking at the schedule. And then they got Vegas, Thieves, and Toronto down the stretch. So I have a good feeling that OpTic is going to be either the 1 or 2nd seed going into Major 1. Their schedule does get a little bit harder after that. Atlanta, FaZe, Minnesota, Carolina, Miami, Toronto, LA Thieves, LAG is a little bit of a step harder, but nothing they shouldn't be able to figure out how to get like 6 wins or whatever. And then the last 2 stages, Minnesota, Cloud9, Miami, Vegas, FaZe, easy. And then Vancouver, Boston, Carolina, LAG, and Toronto, also easy. So, I mean, in the same vein we talk about with Atlanta, FaZe, OpTic Texas should be a top 2 seed pretty much all year as far as like online and being able to. Obviously, winning events and the extra points you get with that will make difference amongst the top 3. But like purely on online volume, like OpTic should be able to take care of this schedule with ease. They did get upset quite a bit last year. A lot of that was during that one stage where they played poorly, and they had a couple of upsets earlier in the season as well. But if you're an OpTic Texas fan, look, I think looking at the schedule, looking at the performance of the players, as long as they deal with the complacency wall that sets into every team that we've seen win champs, I think they're going to be very good position to try and run it back. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it off. My guess is no, but I think they're going to be in a good position to do it. I do think there is a world, though, with this OpTic Texas team where they do face some adversity this season. They do have an issue really getting through the slog of things. And I'm very curious to see if they can tap into the energy and the mindset they had after Major 4 last year to get out of that, where they fall victim to what we've seen a lot of teams do. And this is a year where they get close, but they don't win an event. And then suddenly they head into the offseason really not wanting to unwind this team, but maybe having to do it. I think they're going to win one or two events. I don't think they're going to win champs. My guess is probably, I think they will take care of EWC if they play poorly at champs and close out the season well and probably run it back with the squad. But it might be an up and down season for them. It's not easy to go back-to-back champs. They're going to try it. I don't really think they're going to pull it off, though. Now, this next team I don't think is going to pull it off either, and that is Toronto Ultra. And they have made some significant changes from the roster you see last season. The next inside scrapping, Envoy scrap and Envoy are gone. In comes Joe Deceives. In comes Ben Beans. And last year, I think for Toronto and why they're making the changes now, they had a great start to the season. They were clearly the best team at the beginning of the year, but they really struggled to either close out in a final. They got slammed in Major 3 against OpTic, or just make a final. You see the 2 forts, the 3rd at champs, and the top 8 at EWC. I think just Toronto was just 2nd, 3rd, 4th fiddle to all the other top teams after that first major, and were never able to get to the level required when pretty much our whole roster was playing at like an MVP level at the first event. And so in comes Ben Beans, who had kind of a weird season with Carolina, and Joe Deceives, who played great with Thieves and got that finals appearance at the end of the year and played pretty good at champs as well. And I think the thing with Joe and Ben is I look at the game modes where Toronto was strong at last year, and generally should play well, like S&D. I think they're 2 players that contribute in a quality fashion to that game mode. To Hardpoint, like you look at the team breakdown, they should be very solid. Control, I don't know with this team. I'm gonna be honest, I'm very curious to see how they play at Control. Toronto, for the most part last year, was like fairly automatic in this game mode. If I scroll down and show you, 7-4 at the first stage, 7-4 at stage 2, 7-4 at stage 3, 9-3 at stage 4, and then 4-1 at champs. They were good at Control all year. And I think a lot of that is because Envoy and Scrap are excellent Control players. We will see with Joe and Ben if they can keep up that clip at Control. But their hardpoint should be really, really good. And Toronto is one of the teams that I like as far as the outside the top 3 to really be able to handle and generate enough slaying to really compete with those top squads. And I also think in general to have the right team environment to really understand what is required of them to be a contender throughout the year. I would say for me, though, the player that is a big X factor for this team now is Jamie inside. With Ben coming in, Ben Beans, I think he's going to have a great season. Want to see if Jamie can follow up and really get to that excellent level. I mean, his S&D stats last year, when we click these out here, you see his S&D stats. These are land stats, by the way. I've only included all of the lands that were played. I think Champs is included in here as well. Champs is actually not included. Let me include Champs. So if we include Champs, get a 118 S&D last year. Not a lot of first bloods, but a lot of clutches, a lot of smart play. Like if Jamie can provide that floor again, because they're losing a lot of production with Scrap, I think it'll be really, really key. But I just think I really like the moves that Toronto has made here. You want to see if Toby have a better season. I think he'll rebound. This game's like perfect for him and the way that he plays. But I like the build for Toronto. And let's take a look at their schedule and see who they play and kind of wrap up my thoughts on the squad. So FaZe in Vancouver first weekend, and then Vegas, Miami. There's 2-3 wins in there for Toronto. I think they should get off to a good start. And playing FaZe first, probably the best time to play them. Minnesota, LAG, OpTic to close out. So I think Toronto should be a winner's bracket team for the first stage. From there, they have Cloud9, Carolina, Boston, Thieves, Vegas, OpTic, Vancouver. A bit of an interesting split. I think they should be able to take care of this one. I think there's 5 wins in here for them. Vegas and Boston and Carolina should be teams they should beat. Then Cloud9, Vancouver, maybe get one of the upsets. They should be able to make winner's bracket again. This is the one of the harder splits. FaZe, Boston, Thieves, Miami, LAG. So FaZe and Thieves are going to be tough matches. You got Boston, Miami, and LAG. And because there's only 5, you really need to execute and win those 3 matches against the non-2 top teams. So if there's any major where I think Toronto might slip up. It could be major 3. And then to close out the season, Carolina, Cloud9, Minnesota, Vancouver, OpTic should make winners bracket. So I think if you're a Toronto fan, they should make champs. Purely on just the online stuff aside here, champs should be in the equation. I think that they have the tools to be the 4th best team throughout the year compared to, say, Cloud9 or Carolina or Vancouver. I just think playing combination with S&D prowess should be enough for this team to be there or thereabouts this year. Is that enough for them to win an event? I'm not really sure. You know, I definitely think it is possible. I think they have players on their team outside of Ben who all made finals last year. So if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be them. But my prediction is they'll probably make a final and lose. They'll make a couple of top 3s, I'll predict. They'll upset a few teams in like losers bracket. But I don't think they're going to win one. I think they're going to get real close though at some point throughout the year. And obviously be a factor throughout the year at events and online and really be in the conversation amongst the good squads in the league. And I think the top squads in the league may also include this squad and the final squad we're going to talk about in this video, and that is the Vancouver Surge. So a bit of a different roster this year. Hook and Brezzy are gone, and we'll talk about their pickups in a sec. But last year online, were fairly consistent at being the 6th best team in the league, but that was really pretty much their ceiling all year. And they had a couple of low points, major 2, before they made the roster change and brought no 4. It was like their worst split. And they didn't really factor in at champs. At EWC, they took care of business against the Minnesota Rocker team and actually beat C9, aka New York, in the qualification match, the winners match. They were actually one of the teams, if you're looking going to the playoffs, that might make a fun run. They took care of business. It was a tight one against Carolina, Ben Beans and them, but then they got 3-0 smoked by Thieves after they beat Toronto and only got 4th at EWC. But that's like, I think, a pretty good spot to end. And I think it pretty much sums up kind of how Vancouver/Seattle played last year. If you look at the overall stats, and they're nothing too crazy, they were pretty good at search all year, but the respawn was inconsistent. But you can see that if we scroll through here, they had a pretty good record against most of the bottom of mid-pack squads. 3-1 against Boston, 2-3 against Vegas Legion, 2-2 against Minnesota Rocker. They struggled against Miami all year, 2-0 against LAG, 3-1 against Carolina. But if we scroll through back to the top, going to get to my next point, which is against the good teams in the league, they were a non-factor. They had 1 victory against Toronto, which I believe was online at some point. They did go 1-1 against Thieves, which is respectable. But they couldn't beat OpTic, couldn't beat FaZe, and were 1-4 against New York. So they only had 2 victories against the top 4 teams, which again is the reason that when we go back and look at the tournament results, that's why they got 6th at a bunch of these events. We click through and say go to major 1, and I scroll down here and show you like kind of where they got tripped up, right? You know, they got 3-0 by Toronto early on in that event. They kind of then made the run. They beat Boston, they beat Carolina, and look who they lost to, OpTic Texas. The 3-0, 3-1 loss. These top teams was their MO all year. Do I think that their inclusions of Nasty coming over from LA Thieves and Charlie Hicksey coming over from EU Challengers after a stint with Toronto Ultra the year prior will help? You know, that's an interesting question. I think their build now, when you look at the team of 04, Abuza, Hicksey, and Nasty, the slaying on that team is a little bit iffy, but the decision making might be good enough that when you look at how the beginning of years play, which really favored disciplined teams, prepared teams that know what are going on, assuming it's a normal game and not like a W or something crazy that's like a trade, flood kind of game, they should be a team that kind of sticks around as a hard out in the beginning of the year. But my concern is that they have sacrificed, you know, with Kyler especially out, they've sacrificed a lot of slaying. They're putting a lot of onus on a player like 04 to slay an elite level for this team to be a factor. And the problem with that is if you look at his stats from last year, I mean, he was great in search. You see how active he was in S&D, like one of the top search players in the league. But when you look at his ability to win big gunfights, to really slay at a high level, not I'm saying in terms of speed, because he was definitely, you know, creating at a good volume. You look at that 0.92 in hardpoint, 0.95 in control, like that is not good enough for a player required, especially when they have Hicksey, we know he's going to struggle to slay. Byron Nasty, who is what I would say, I use like an analytics term, like a replacement level player. Like I think Nasty is good, but he's like just an average player who's going to give you fairly average production. They need someone to be a second superstar in this team because we know Abuza is going to do it. It's got to be 04, and I got questions if he is going to be able to pull it off and respawn. But if he does, they are going to be very good and very difficult to beat. All right, who are they playing? And then we'll wrap up our thoughts on them. So major one, the beginning, they have Toronto and Miami that first weekend. Some fun teams to play. I think they should be able to go 1-1 or 2-0. And they have OpTic in Boston. So Vancouver's in a great spot to open up the season 3-1 looking at this schedule. And then they've got Vegas, Carolina, and Minnesota. So if you are Vancouver, just like we said with Miami, got to take advantage of a major one schedule where you'll only play one of the top 3 teams, which isn't the case in the next split because they have FaZe, Cloud9, LAG, Thieves, Miami, Toronto, and Minnesota. I think this is difficult, and Vancouver's going to have to battle those winter blues, sort of the February, March period where everybody's going to go back and watch that major one VOD and start to get really better. If you're a Vancouver team that pulls like a Minnesota from last year and you get top 4 at that first event, a lot of people watching your VOD, and this is a difficult schedule that I see ahead of them in Major 2 to try and make a winner's bracket. I think they can do it. It's not going to be easy. But the Major 3 split opens up a little bit. They only play Thieves. It's the only top 3 team they play. Other than that, they have Vegas, LAG, Carolina, and Cloud9. I think that is very winnable. And then coming in their most difficult split. So if they are in a fight to get a champ spot, this is not what you want to see in that scenario. FaZe and OpTic to open up the split. Then Boston, Toronto, and then Minnesota. Like, it's 5 games, these last 2 major qualifiers, and 3 of them are against top 3 teams. So likely if you are to Vancouver, you might need some help to make winners bracket, or you're going to need to upset and clean house against Boston and Minnesota Rockers. So a real tough end, a real tough final split for Vancouver. But my prediction for them is this. I think that if 04 plays well, and I think he's the biggest X factor on the team, I think they are going to, just like with Toronto, be around that top 6, top 4 conversation all year. And yeah, they may have some tough splits, but they will make champs, and we'll see if they make noise at the end of the year. I don't think they're going to win the event, but if 04, especially in that first kind of major one, if 04 really fries, Abuza really fries, they get good quality production from Hixie, and Nasty has those events where he pops off. We saw that last year, like the last 2 events. He was playing very good. They could make a final. That being said, if they are mediocre all year and it comes down to this last stage, I don't know. They could be a surprise team that doesn't make champs based on the fact that coming in, the schedule is very difficult. And the other difficult thing is that if 04 really struggles to slay consistently respawn, I think this team is going to get bowled over in a lot of series. So I think their floor to ceiling is pretty split. Like, I think for Toronto, their floor to ceiling is a lot more compact, and I expect Toronto to be comfortably in the champ spot. I can see a role where this Vancouver team is not. I can see a role where they're in. I'm going to say, for the sake of a prediction, they're going to be in, but I don't think it's always going to be a smooth ride with them this year. I hope that 04 takes the next step up this season, or they may have some significant issues with their squad. So yeah, that is my predictions for Atlanta FaZe and OpTic, who I think will win multiple events this year. Toronto and Vancouver, who I think could make a final. I really think this is a year, with the way that this game plays and the top 3 teams and matchups, like, I just think that 4th best team can sometimes sneak into the final at some of these events. I think it's possible, more so Toronto for Vancouver to do it in my mind. But I think both those should be champs teams. And then Miami, unfortunately, I do not see making champs this year. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of the video. We're going to cover Thieves, Carolina, Minnesota, Boston, and Vegas Falcons on the next video. We'll see you guys on that one. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more.